In the words used to describe Andrew Luck, this guy is fascinated about everything. He's interested in everything. And here we have a leadership paradox that relates to time, energy, attention, and expertise. If we know life is all about trade-offs and opportunity cost, choosing to do activity A now means I'm foregoing the opportunity to pursue activity B.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. On this show, we bring you ideas and insights every single week from construction leaders across the industry, as well as some insights from the world of sports on occasion, like this week, given the Super Bowl we just played, all in the effort to help you lead more effectively. Now, this episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. If you have sales reps, if you have business development managers, I don't care what euphemism you use to describe the people who sell for a living, if they are not consistently and with discipline forecasting into the future what they expect their future sales to be, you, my friend, are flying blind. How do we solve it? Do we go through a multi-year process and spend significant sums of money, several $100,000 to introduce and launch a new CRM? No, you don't. It's going to take forever. What you should do immediately, starting today, take 30 minutes and we can solve that problem by organizing and valuing each individual rep's sales pipeline. How? Through the Simple Sales Pipeline. Where can you learn more? Well, as you expect, thesimpleSalesPipeline.com. As you are now listening to this, Super Bowl 57 has been played, and if my prognostication is correct, which of course I am wildly overconfident about, the Philadelphia Eagles have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs by a thin margin of 28-27 in what was surely a barn burner of a game. And barn burners, as you know, those are the best types of games. But if my prediction has now been proven to be wildly and laughably incorrect, well, it's as good a segue as can be found, because in today's episode, we're talking about humility and leadership, and, among other things, Patrick Lencioni and Andrew Luck. In his book, The Ideal Team Player, Lencioni tapped into an attribute triad that has resonated with many leaders responsible for building strong teams. In the book, which I would recommend to a friend, not only because the fictional narrative is about a construction firm, but that certainly doesn't help, Lencioni identified what ideal team players should be. They should be humble, hungry, and smart. Humble, hungry, and smart. That's it. Humble, hungry, and smart. And it's easy to remember, even for me, without a clever double entendre-ish acronym. And every now and then, there comes along someone in the public eye who displays these qualities of an ideal team player. Humble, hungry, and smart with near unanimity. And they're great. This is a rare combination indeed. Humble, hungry, smart, and great. And after reading The Ideal Team Player in early 2022, I stumbled into a podcast on The Athletic, simply titled Luck. Now, quick digression here because that's what I do. The artificial intelligence, or AI engine known as ChatGPT, is causing an uproar as of late. Now, maybe you have heard about this, and if you haven't, your kids surely have, as they will never have to write a school essay again. Anyway, a recent headline read, Sports Illustrated uses AI to write articles. And my candid response was, no shit. After being a loyal subscriber for 25 years, I canceled my subscription in 2020 as their writing seemed to be written by a computer or some human not fully educated in the nuances of the English language, and certainly unaware of anything remotely close to a coherent 5-paragraph essay. Here's my point. Don't fear AI. Make sure your kids learn to think for themselves. And if you want to read the authors who used to write for Sports Illustrated, they've all moved over to The Athletic, where this podcast I'm referring to is found. If you like intelligent articles about sports and are not revulsed by the idea of paying a small sum for good writing by real human beings, check out The Athletic. All right, back to the story. The 6-episode miniseries podcast was excellent. On the surface, it's a story about the meteoric rise and surprising departure of Indianapolis Colts all-pro quarterback Andrew Luck. More than that, though, it's a nonfiction audio narrative that defines what it means to be humble, hungry, and smart. And great. As a tool for improving leadership, coaching, and training, you can share it with anyone wishing to be a better leader and say, here, listen to this, act accordingly, and you'll have better luck leading people. Did you see what I did there? Did you see what I did? Better luck leading people by learning from Andrew Luck. Along with the artist and general manager known as ETP, Eric, the producer, the guy behind the scenes who makes this podcast run like a Swiss watch and manages me with a delicate touch and occasionally a well-placed sledgehammer, we identified a few clips that offer a glimpse into the leadership style of Andrew Luck and his humility, his hunger to win, his intelligence, social IQ, emotional IQ, as well as cognitive IQ, and ultimately his greatness, however brief we witnessed it on the biggest stage. Now, in this first clip, former Stanford head coach David Shaw shares some context about Andrew Luck's recruiting process. At the time, David Shaw was an assistant coach under Jim Harbaugh, who ultimately left Stanford to coach the 49ers, losing in a Super Bowl to his brother, and he currently coaches at the University of Michigan, where he threatens to leave every single offseason. Here's David Shaw.
Came on a visit, and typical Andrew, no fanfare, came with his dad, Oliver. The four of us sat down, Coach Harbaugh and myself, and had a very non-recruiting meeting. More so, it wasn't salesmanship, which Jim's a great salesman. You know, I can hold my own, but we weren't selling Stanford to Andrew and his dad. Like Stanford was Stanford to them. They understood it. It was really more of like, hey, do we have some commonality here? It was really very casual, but I don't want to give you the sense that it was underwhelming. Almost feeling like this isn't a kid, right? And you wonder, when was he ever a kid? Was he ever a kid? But I think that calm and that confidence, and I think he had to work really hard not to be overconfident, because I think early on, he knew how good he was.
Now, two things jumped out to me in this clip. The first is that the strongest relationships, be it between firms, an owner and a GC and a subcontractor, a supplier and a builder, or between individuals you are interviewing or recruiting for your team, the strongest relationships begin with the search for fit. That's right, the search for fit. Do we fit together? Regardless of who's buying or selling in this relationship, and here with Stanford and Andrew Luck, it was probably a bit of both, as Stanford was also recruiting Robert Griffin III, the quarterback who would eventually land at Baylor and would battle Luck for the Heisman Trophy in 2011. David Shaw names it in this clip. He says, it wasn't salesmanship. So whether you are selling in a very literal sense between companies with labor or building materials, or between people recruiting talent to grow your team, quit selling and start the search for fit. Hey, do we have some commonality here? Maintain an abundance mentality and believe there are more opportunities than time. So start with the search for fit and be confident that you can walk away if there isn't some commonality there. And speaking of confidence, David Shaw recognizes that talented, intelligent people like Andrew Luck, in young leaders and tenured executives, often have to work really hard not to be overconfident. Overconfidence is a primary driver of biases that increase risk. The phrase I repeat often to myself and our clients is this: strong views, loosely held. Strong views, loosely held. To be successful, you need the courage to act on your beliefs, to remain steadfast in the face of doubt and disbelief. Without confidence, you will not develop the courage to commit. Now, the downside is, as leaders accumulate more successes due to their confidence and courage and commitment, They calcify their thinking and grow more rigid. They know what works. Why change? They fail to change their views when new information and new insights come to light. They have strong views and they are strongly held, and this increases risk. So beware of overconfidence in yourself and others. Work hard to limit overconfidence. Now, in this next clip, you'll hear from Stanford's incumbent quarterback upon Andrew Luck's arrival.
Yeah, I can't get away from the guy. I give him crap all the time. I'm like, you came, you took my job, and now I have your name on my business card. And it's on my door. I can't get away from it.
Tavita Pritchard is now the offensive coordinator at Stanford, but his official title is the Andrew Luck Director of Offense. The position's name was changed as part of an endowment gift from a school donor. Back when Luck arrived on campus, Pritchard was Stanford's incumbent quarterback. And at the time, he had no idea that he was about to lose his job.
For Andrew, I think the biggest thing for me was, I think you seemingly have this kind of stereotypical dad played in the league. I think there was a little bit of a stereotype there that, almost immediately he kind of went against, the growing up overseas, which I think it just gave him a really unique perspective. I think all of us who grew up here in the United States, we were caught up in a lot of other things. He came in here and he was about the relationships, and it was very clear from early on that he wasn't your stereotypical Texas high school quarterback.
As we just discussed, preconceived notions and biases are risky. If all you knew was that Andrew Luck's father, Oliver, was an NFL quarterback and they're from Texas, you can start extrapolating a series of plausible, yet incorrect, assumptions about who Andrew Luck is and how he will probably act. But Andrew Luck grew up in London and Europe as his father was in charge of NFL Europe at the time, and he came to the United States and American football relatively late. And Luck's experience and unique perspective developed growing up a foreigner in another country begins to shape what I call the relationship squared principle of leadership. Relationship squared. Okay, what the hell does that mean? Well, in construction, we always talk about it being a relationship business. It's about who you know and how they help you grow. And the former quarterback, Pritchard, puts his thumb on it. He says, Luck came in here and was all about the relationships. He's referring to developing trust-based relationships with his teammates, the coaches, and the school. And that's relationships 1.0, or relationships to the first power. And it's obviously essential. Now, the second power, or the force multiplier in the relationship squared principle of leadership, is the relationship with different ideas. Andrew Luck was exposed to different ideas and different languages and different sports growing up abroad. Some listeners surely have likewise benefited from cross-cultural context. Others have not. So if you grew up and went to school and got a job all in the same place, you'll naturally have a rather narrow view of relationships with other people and, potentially, relationships with other ideas. It's neither good nor bad. For leaders, the question is, are they aware of it? As you'll hear, Luck is a fantastic example of someone who intentionally develops the relationship squared principle of leadership. He actively seeks out new personal relationships with people while generating a consistent flow of interdisciplinary ideas and works to identify useful relationships between them. Relationships with people, relationships with ideas, constantly moving back and forth. Now, in this next clip, Pritchard shares his experience when Andrew Luck arrives on campus and becomes the starting quarterback's newest mentee.
I was the incumbent starter. I was going to be the guy starting going forward. So he took to me because he just kind of attached himself to my hip. The same things I advise our young guys to do is exactly what he did his first summer here. He's next to me, honestly, the entire summer. Okay, what's this? Okay, how do we read? To the point where it was hey man, give me a little bit of space.
The physical gifts were obvious, but what made Luck such a complete quarterback was his mastery of the mental game. He got it from the very beginning.
And it was very clear that this whole football thing was, and again, this is unfair of me probably because it's hindsight, but everything came pretty naturally. It didn't seem like it was real taxing. I remember the stuff that gave me pause as a freshman. He was okay, yeah, I got that. I'm you do got that already? Damn.
For young leaders entering the workforce or tenured leaders entering a new role, the identification of a mentor or guide is paramount. There's always someone who is returning, on their way back from the destination you wish to seek. Find them. Seek them out. Success leaves clues, as they say. As Pritchard notes, the best leaders begin with talent and focus on the mastery of the mental game, how to think accurately beyond the conventional thinking. If you are simply reading and relating what everybody else is saying, you're just adding to the noise. Thinking back to Lencioni's hungry, humble, and smart framework, this tenacity to shadow the journeyman and learn from them represents all three: the humility to learn from others, the hunger to attach yourself to someone else and set aside potential awkwardness, and the smarts to ask intelligent questions and digest the curriculum necessary to achieve the next level of mastery. Here in clip 4, David Shaw is back sharing a story that illustrates how leaders like Andrew Luck think and act.
Another great perfect Andrew Luck story. He's right in the middle of the Heisman race, and we play Washington. And Washington basically was playing these different versions of Too High. And we had done so much to put the game in Andrew's hands to where he's running the show. We gave him a bunch of options. He can give us one of the 3 plays we gave him that play, or he could choose something else on his own. We broke the school record for rushing that game. I think it was 446 yards, something like that.
In a game where Luck could have done anything he wanted on the field, he only attempted 21 passes that night, completing 16 for a modest 169 yards. It wasn't exactly an electric box score, but Stanford won going away 65-21.
I came just short of apologizing to Andrew. Came just short of apologizing because he's in the middle of this Heisman race and the nation is watching. He's like, "Coach, are you kidding me?" He's like, "I just played my best game." He said, "That was a chess match between me and the defensive coordinator. I saw what they were doing and I went to the weak spot every single time." And it's like at the same time, you're like, "Oh my God, I love you," right? That you see the game that way and you take yourself out of it. And at the same time, like, doggone it, can't you be a little selfish? Like, don't you want that Heisman Trophy? Don't you want these other things? It legitimately didn't come into his thinking because he was presented with a game plan. Everything was at his fingertips. And he ran the ball down Washington's throat. Like, that says so much about who he was and had a smile on his face. Like, "Coach, this was awesome." The second part of it is for him to see his teammates excited, for him to see the offensive line, like every play in the huddle, like bouncing on their toes because they're just kicking ass and taking names, and to see every single one of these runners, his boys rushing for 100 yards and 5, 10, 15 yards a clip. Like, nothing could be better for Andrew. That was that quintessential monster, which had nothing to do with him and his stats. It had to do with him saying, "I just kicked your ass today and I didn't have to throw the ball."
Now, allow me to start here and say that if you win the Heisman Trophy, earning the iconic stiff-arm trophy as the best college football player in the country in a given year, you can basically shut it down from there. Whatever else follows you afterwards, you, my friend, have a legacy. The Heisman Trophy is that iconic, and it has so much value to not only the player, but the school and the crazy alumni fan base. Every year, coaches and players and university marketing departments go out of their way, spending a ton of time and money and attention to increase the odds a Heisman Trophy will come home to their campus. And given the opportunity to do so, to rack up passing yards and TDs against a weak opponent, what did Luck do? He handed the ball off like 100 times. A key question every leader should ask of themselves and those they lead is this: can you give me a recent example in the last 24 or 48 or 72 hours where you tangibly supported and promoted your teammates, having the humility to put your team ahead of yourself? To some leaders, this type of unselfish promotion of teammates comes easily. To others, its execution is more intentional and deliberate. Either way, a leader must seek out opportunities to see his teammates excited and allow the spotlight to shine on them as well. The counterintuitive insight here, as Andrew Luck and his teammates demonstrated, is that by delegating the effort, handing the ball off to running backs and allowing the linemen to have fun run blocking, far more enjoyable than pass blocking, delegating that effort and sharing the spotlight leads to less work. Increased engagement for the team, less work for the leader. I mean, who doesn't want that? Well, those leaders that secretly, or not so secretly, want to win the legacy locking awards in life, like the Heisman Trophy. Andrew Luck cared more about the challenge of the game and the engagement and excitement of his teammates than his own personal accolades. But there was a very real cost to this. When your team scores 65 points and the starting quarterback, the star quarterback, only throws for 169 yards, it's proving the team is more important than any single player. So, posed as a question another way, how important can the quarterback actually be when his team plays that well without his best efforts? Andrew Luck simply wasn't concerned with answering that. And so, Andrew Luck came in second in the Heisman Trophy balloting, twice, losing out to Cam Newton of Auburn in 2010 and Robert Griffin III from Baylor in 2011. In this next clip, an Indianapolis reporter describes his experience leading up to an in-depth interview with Andrew Luck.
And one of the things that we asked was that, because we did have this concept of capturing all the sides of him, right? And so one of the things we asked him, and this was a photographer's idea, Michelle Pemberton, she said, what about if we asked him to bring some of his favorite reading material? And it was sort of a prop, right? And it was so revealing to see what he brought. One of the books was the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. Great choice, right? It's 900 pages or something ridiculous, but it's so just how inquisitive he is just about just random topics. He also had an interesting magazine that I don't think I've ever read. It was Inc. magazine. And it was, this is a magazine that profiles leaders in business and industry and innovative people. And they really had nothing to do with each other. But I think it showed you just what a person of varied interest. And that is the part of Andrew Luck one of the parts at least, that always fascinated me the most. This guy is just fascinated about everything, interested in everything. And I remember some quotes in that story that still stick with me. One being this person telling me, he's the type of person who can have a conversation with anybody about anything. It's 100% true. But that is also why I think he was such a great leader in the locker room and why he endeared himself to other players so much. It's in part because he was such an interesting person and interested in so many other things that he always found a way to relate to someone because he probably knew something about something they were interested in.
So here's the second power, the squaring, if you will, involved in the relationship squared principle of leadership. Relationships to the first power refers to the relationships with people. Taking relationships to the second power refers to relationships with new ideas. And intentionally introducing these ideas to the relationships within your network. What drives this relationship squared principle of leadership is curiosity. In the words used to describe Andrew Luck, this guy is fascinated about everything. He's interested in everything. And here we have a leadership paradox that relates to time, energy, attention, and expertise. If we know life is all about trade-offs and opportunity cost, choosing to do activity A now means I'm foregoing the opportunity to pursue activity B now. Then being fascinated about everything means I'm making trade-offs about going really deep in a single subject. If Andrew Luck, for example, is reading a book on the history of concrete in construction and then talking to his teammates about it, which, by the way, is a true story and was detailed in the podcast because Andrew Luck was an architecture major at Stanford, well, if he's reading that, he's not reading his playbook or watching more film or reading about the history of the run and shoot offense. So, do we want our leaders to be a mile wide and an inch deep, knowing a lot of different topics and subjects, but with only a little bit of depth? Or do we want our leaders to be true experts, an inch wide and a mile deep? In truth, we want both. Sampling widely with your reading and watching and listening allows you to bring in interdisciplinary ideas to your network, which increases the probability of unconventional thinking and increases the potential you can speak somewhat intelligently on a number of topics that increases the probability of building connections with a diverse number of people. As the reporter noted, he was such an interesting person and interested in so many things that he always found a way to relate to someone because he probably knew something about the thing that they were interested in. Leaders know it's not about them. It's about other people, their teammates families. Same goes for you as well as your customers and their teams and their families. To gauge your success in this realm of circulating new ideas among your network, that is, living out the relationship squared principle of leadership, you can ask yourself or your colleagues a simple question. What new ideas have you brought to fill in the blank of someone in your network in the last 30 days? So what new ideas have you brought to Tom in the last 30 days? What new ideas have you brought to Sarah in the last 60 days or 90 days or 6 months or the year? And if you can't name the idea, maybe it didn't happen. So stay curious, read and listen and watch widely. Charlie Tremendous Jones has a classic quote I'm reminded of here. He says, 5 years from now, you will be the same person you are today, except for the books you read and the people you meet. Luckily for you, it's never been easier to read books and meet new people, which also often happen at the same time. Books introduce you to new people. Podcasts or books on Audible, or it's possible that your local library already subscribes to an app called Cloud Library that will allow you to listen to books on audio for free, or any new documentaries or foreign films on Netflix or Disney Plus or Apple TV or Paramount Plus, whatever. There's 100 different ways you can access new information. It's never been easier in the history of the world to consume new ideas and meet new people, to intentionally develop your own relationship squared principle of leadership. Relationships with people, relationships with ideas. And here in this last clip, you'll hear future general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, Chris Ballard, and his opinion on the best display of leadership he's ever seen, which he witnessed from the opposing team's locker room while he was with the Kansas City Chiefs.
This is Chris Ballard, who was hired as the Colts general manager in January of 2017. He'd spent the last 4 years in the Kansas City Chiefs front office, where he'd witnessed some of Andrew Luck's finest moments from afar and some from up close.
Watched him play, and struggle for 3 quarters against us, and then in the fourth quarter absolutely come alive.
Including the incredible 28-point deficit that Luck erased in that wild card playoff game his second year.
I think we were up 38-10, and then just got on a really hot streak and come back and have one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history. So I had tremendous respect for, him, the player.
But it wasn't that comeback that stuck with Ballard the most. It's what Luck said and what he didn't after the Chiefs beat him up in a 2016 regular season game. Despite losing their starting quarterback in the third quarter, the Chiefs left with an easy 30-14 win, absolutely owning the Colts up front on both sides of the ball. And Luck, per usual, took the brunt of the punishment. He was sacked 6 times and hit 12 times.
I'll never forget in 16, we play him, and we had got after him pretty good. And after the game, I was up in the press box doing work for some, trying to get workouts and players set for that Monday, because we had a couple players injured in the game. And I remember watching Andrew's press conference.
Was the basis of the offensive struggles today?
Yeah, me. I know I struggled. I think every offensive player in the room feels like we let each other down.
He just, you're asking questions. Andrew, you were hit multiple times in this game. What do you attribute those to? And Andrew said, you know what? I got to get rid of the ball. That's my fault. I've got to get rid of the ball.
Yeah. And guys are going to work their butts off. And, if a holding is called, guys are straining. Guys are doing a great job, I think, up front to allow those plays to happen. And it's certainly, but it's not just penalties on things. It's drop snaps. It's interceptions. It's missed opportunities. There's a lot more than an O lineman working his butt off to help protect.
Andrew, you forced him. You had a pick here. Can't remember what quarter it was, and I remember it was because of what play we had really pressured him on. And that's my fault. I got to throw a more accurate pass.
What do you think happened? Did he slip on the route? Or
a good break by the corner, and probably not a very good ball, or decision for that matter. And he made a heck of a play. Wish one of those you wish you could have back.
And I just remember sitting there thinking, here's a guy that we just beat up physically. He just owns it all. He takes all and leaves all the pressure off everybody else around him and never blames anyone else. And I'll never forget walking downstairs and telling, I think it was Coach and John, hey man, I just witnessed one of the most unbelievable press conferences in terms of leadership that I'd ever seen.
A friend and mentor of mine who has been on this podcast several times, Mr. Tim Rethlake, once surmised leadership for me in 4 words. Give credit, take blame. That's it. When in doubt, give credit, take blame. In an industry like construction, where former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink is idolized and his book, Extreme Ownership, is referred to others to read, often this leadership maxim is violated every single day. Extreme ownership is the practice of owning everything in your world, taking your personal accountability to the extreme. In football, leaders of teams will say, well, I'm either coaching it or I'm allowing it to happen. Either way, it's my fault. That's what extreme ownership sounds like. It means you are responsible for not just those tasks which you directly control, but for all those tasks and activities and variables that affect whether or not your mission is successful. It always falls back on the accountability of the leader. Ballard hits on the important impact of this type of leadership. It relieves all the pressure from everyone else. Give credit, take blame. And if you and I and the people we wish to lead and those that wish to improve their leadership can marinate ourselves in these stories like Luck, we can increase the probability of acting similarly in our own lives. This podcast, Luck, reinforces what it means to be a leader and an ideal team player, someone who is humble, hungry, and smart, and for a moment in time, great. And this is a rare combination indeed. Humble, hungry, smart, and great. Hopefully these clips can help you in some small way, maybe inspire you to lead differently. You can listen to this 6-episode series, obviously, at The Athletic, where it was created, also available for free on Apple Podcasts. Links to Luck, the podcast, and The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni are in the show notes. And remember the relationship squared principle of leadership, relationships with not only people, but new ideas as well, and introducing these new ideas to those relationships in your network. So thank you for listening. And of course, and obviously, I must end this episode with good luck. This episode was brought to you by The Simple Sales Pipeline. You can learn more by visiting thesimplesalespipeline.com. As for us, we're to close out like we always do. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first.